The coffee shop buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy when my wife Lena decided to destroy what remained of my dignity. She sat across from me, perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around her oat milk latte, surrounded by her gaggle of agency friends like some sort of twisted royal court. "You really think I'd ever introduce you to my parents at the country club gala?" she said, loud enough for half the cafe to hear. Her voice carried that particular tone she'd perfected, sweet on the surface, razor-sharp underneath. Her friends giggled like schoolgirls. Jules, her supposed best friend, nearly choked on her matcha. The others, Madison, Chloe, and that new intern whose name I never bothered learning, all stared at me with barely concealed amusement. I'm Nick Garrison, 43 years old, senior analyst at Midwest Financial. I've spent the last 15 years climbing from a cubicle in the basement to a corner office on the 14th floor. Not glamorous, but respectable. Apparently not respectable enough for Lena's social circle. "Don't worry," I said, standing up slowly and looking directly into her emerald eyes. "You won't have to." The table went quiet. Even the barista stopped grinding beans for a moment. I walked out without another word, leaving my untouched Americano growing cold on the table. The bell above the door chimed behind me like a funeral dirge. That night, alone in our suburban home while Lena attended another networking event, I sat in my basement office staring at spreadsheets. Numbers had always made sense to me. People, apparently, did not. My phone buzzed. A text from Jules, of all people. "Nick, we need to talk. What happened today wasn't right. There's stuff you don't know about Lena. Meet me at Murphy's Bar tomorrow at 7. I stared at the message for a long time. Jules had never spoken to me directly in the 5 years I'd known her. She was Lena's shadow, her echo, her willing accomplice in every social gathering where I felt like an unwelcome guest in my own marriage. Why would she want to help me now? Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Another text arrived. "She's been saying things about you to everyone, horrible things. And there's someone else involved, someone you know." My hands trembled as I set the phone down. Outside, a winter storm was brewing over our quiet neighborhood. The wind rattled the windows of our 2-story colonial, the house Lena had insisted we buy because it looked successful from the street. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years to afford the down payment. Now it felt like a prison. The basement office had become my refuge. Down here, surrounded by filing cabinets and my collection of vintage calculators, I could think clearly. Up there, in Lena's domain of designer furniture and abstract art, I felt like an intruder. I opened my laptop and did what I do best. I started analyzing data, our joint bank account, credit card statements, phone bills. If Jules was right about someone else being involved, there would be traces. There always were. What I found made my stomach turn. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel bookings during my business trips. Most damning of all, a recurring payment to something called Dalton Creative Solutions that I'd never authorized. Wes Dalton. I knew that name. He was one of Lena's biggest clients at the agency, some hotshot entrepreneur who'd made millions selling artisanal soap or organic pet food or whatever trendy nonsense was popular this year. I'd met him exactly once, at last year's company Christmas party. Tall, artificially tan, with the kind of confident smile that made me want to check if my wallet was still in my pocket. The payments had been going on for 8 months. Small amounts, never more than $500 at a time, carefully spaced to avoid detection. But I was good with numbers, and patterns jumped out at me like neon signs. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lena. "Working late again. Don't wait up." XO. XO. She used to mean that. Now it felt like mockery. I spent the next hour diving deeper into our financial records. What I discovered was a masterpiece of deception. Lena hadn't just been hiding an affair, she'd been systematically draining our savings to fund her new lifestyle. Designer clothes charged to cards I didn't know existed. A safety deposit box rented under her maiden name. Even our joint investment account had been quietly liquidated over the past 6 months. She'd been planning her exit strategy while I worked late nights to pay for a marriage that was already over. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that I'd been living with a stranger. The woman I'd married 7 years ago, or thought I'd married, had never existed. She'd been playing a role, waiting for something better to come along. Apparently, Wes Dalton was that something better. I closed the laptop and climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Lena's side of the closet was half empty. Her jewelry box, usually overflowing with the pieces I'd given her for birthdays and anniversaries, contained only the cheap stuff. The good pieces, the diamond earrings, the pearl necklace, the Cartier watch, were gone. She'd been moving out gradually, taking everything of value while leaving me with the mortgage, the utilities, and the illusion that we still had a marriage worth saving. Tomorrow, I would meet Jules at Murphy's bar and learn exactly how deep this betrayal went. Tonight, I would plan my response. Because if Lena thought she could humiliate me in public and walk away with half of everything I'd worked for, she was about to learn that the quiet, boring husband she'd been mocking had some surprises of his own. I'd spent my entire career analyzing risk and reward, finding patterns others missed, turning raw data into actionable intelligence. Now I was going to apply those same skills to destroying the woman who'd made the mistake of underestimating me. The storm outside was getting worse, but I barely noticed. I had work to do. Murphy's bar sat on the wrong side of downtown, the kind of place where working-class folks went to forget their troubles and nobody asked too many questions. I arrived early and claimed a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and watching the door. Jules walked in at exactly 7 o'clock, her usual designer confidence replaced by nervous energy. She'd traded her typical power suit for jeans and a plain sweater like she was trying to blend in. It didn't work. Everything about her screamed expensive, from her highlighted hair to her Italian leather boots. "Nick," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thanks for meeting me." "Talk," I said. No pleasantries. I wasn't in the mood. She ordered a wine, something organic and overpriced that Murphy's definitely didn't carry, settled for a beer, and took a long breath. "Lena's been planning this for months," she began. "The thing with Wes, the way she's been treating you, all of it, she's been telling everyone you're controlling, that you monitor her spending, that you make her feel trapped." "I've never monitored anything," I said. "Until yesterday." "I know, that's why I'm here." Jules leaned forward. "She's been building a case against you, Nick. Saving text messages, recording conversations, creating a narrative where you're the villain and she's the victim who finally found the courage to leave." The whiskey burned, going down. "What kind of case?" "The kind that gets her alimony. The kind that makes you look like an abusive husband in divorce court." Jules pulled out her phone. "She doesn't know I have this." She showed me a voice recording. Lena's voice, clear and unmistakable. "The key is documentation. I need him to look unstable, possessive, a few strategic arguments, maybe a police report if he gets aggressive enough. Wes says his lawyer can make sure I get at least 60% of everything." My hands clenched around the whiskey glass. "When was this recorded?" 3 weeks ago, at my apartment. She thought I was in the shower." Jules paused the recording. "There's more. She's been telling people you have a drinking problem, that you've been threatening her, that she's afraid of what you might do if you find out about Wes." "People believe that?" "Some do. Lena's very convincing when she wants to be. And Wes has been backing up her story, telling everyone how brave she is for finally standing up to her controlling husband." I finished my whiskey and signaled for another. The bartender, a grizzled man named Tommy who'd probably seen every variety of human misery, poured without comment. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Jules. She looked uncomfortable. "Because it's wrong, and because—" She hesitated. "Because she's been saying things about me, too, planning to cut me out once she doesn't need me anymore. I heard her talking to Wes about how pathetic her friends are, how she can't wait to upgrade her entire social circle." So Jules wasn't being altruistic. She was protecting herself. I could respect that. At least she was honest about her motivations. "What else do you know?" "They're planning to go public next month. Wes is divorcing his wife, some quiet settlement to avoid scandal. Lena's going to file papers and claim she finally found the strength to leave her abusive marriage. They've already put a deposit down on a condo downtown." The second whiskey went down easier than the first. "Paid for with my money?" "Probably. Wes isn't as rich as he pretends to be. His business is mostly smoke and mirrors, and his wife controls most of their actual assets. He needs Lena's divorce settlement as much as she needs his respectability." This was getting interesting. I pulled out my phone and started taking notes. "Tell me about Wes's business." "Dalton Creative Solutions. It's supposed to be a marketing consultancy, but mostly he just throws expensive parties and calls them brand experiences. Half his clients are friends doing him favors. The other half are small businesses he's overcharging for basic services. And Lena's been funneling him money. For months. She calls it consulting fees, but really she's just keeping him afloat until the divorce comes through. She thinks she's investing in their future together." I made more notes. This was better than I'd hoped. Not only was Lena cheating and stealing, she was doing it with someone who was using her as much as she was using me. "I need copies of everything," I said. "Recordings, text messages, anything you have." Jules nodded and started forwarding files to my phone. "There's something else. They're planning a big reveal at the Morrison Gallery opening next Friday, some kind of public debut as a couple. Lena wants to make a statement. The Morrison Gallery. I knew it well. Lena had dragged me to enough pretentious art openings there over the years. It was exactly the kind of venue she'd choose for maximum social impact, all the right people, plenty of witnesses, and enough champagne to loosen tongues. She wants to humiliate you, Jules continued. Show everyone that she's moved on to someone better. Wes thinks it's romantic. I almost laughed. They had no idea what they were walking into. Jules, I said, how would you like to help me give them a night they'll never forget? Her eyes lit up with malicious interest. What did you have in mind? I spent the next hour outlining my plan. It was elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its scope. By the time I finished explaining, Jules was grinning like a shark. That's brilliant, she said, and completely legal. I don't do anything illegal, I replied. I'm just very good at working within the system. We shook hands like business partners, which in a way we were. Jules would be my inside source, feeding me information about Lena and Wes's plans. In return, I'd make sure she came out of this mess with her reputation intact and maybe even improved. After Jules left, I stayed at Murphy's for another hour, refining my strategy. The bartender, Tommy, eventually wandered over. Rough night? He asked. Getting better, I said. Getting much better. I paid my tab and walked out into the cold night air. The storm had passed, leaving the streets clean and bright under the streetlights. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe clearly. Lena thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been playing chess all along. I'd just been letting her think she was winning. The game was about to change. The next morning, I called in sick to work. For the first time in 5 years, I had more important things to do than analyze quarterly reports and risk assessments. I started with Wes Dalton. Public records showed that Dalton Creative Solutions was hemorrhaging money. 3 months behind on rent, multiple unpaid vendor invoices, and a business loan that was about to go into default. His personal finances were even worse. The house he lived in belonged to his wife, Margaret Dalton, who'd inherited it from her father, along with a substantial trust fund. The luxury car he drove was leased through her company. Even his country club membership was paid for by her family's foundation. Wes Dalton wasn't just using my wife to fund his failing business. He was using her to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. And when Lena's divorce settlement came through, he'd probably dump Margaret and marry into my money. The irony was delicious. Lena thought she was trading up from a boring middle-class husband to a wealthy entrepreneur. In reality, she was about to become the sugar mama for a con artist who was even more broke than I'd been when we first met. I spent the afternoon at the downtown library using their computers to research everything I could find about Wes and his business dealings. What I discovered was a pattern of failed ventures, unpaid debts, and angry former partners. The man had been running variations of the same scam for years, charm his way into someone's life, drain their resources, then move on to the next mark. Lena wasn't his first married target. She probably wouldn't be his last. By evening, I had enough ammunition to destroy both of them. The question was how to deploy it for maximum effect. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Having dinner with clients. Home late. Again. I texted back. No problem. Love you. The lie came easily now. I'd been practicing. While Lena was out with her clients, I used her laptop to access her email accounts. She'd always been careless with passwords, using the same combination of her maiden name and birth year for everything. Within minutes, I was reading months of correspondence between her and Wes. The emails were worse than I'd expected. Not just evidence of an affair, but detailed discussions of how to manipulate me, how to hide assets, how to build a case for emotional abuse that would hold up in court. They'd even researched which judges were most sympathetic to women claiming spousal mistreatment. One email from Wes particularly caught my attention. Remember, the goal is to make him snap. Get him angry enough to do something stupid, preferably in front of witnesses. One incident of aggressive behavior and we can get a restraining order. That's when you file for divorce and claim you feared for your safety. They wanted me to lose control. They were counting on it. I copied everything to a secure cloud drive and covered my tracks. Then I opened a bottle of wine, the expensive stuff Lena kept for special occasions, and started planning their destruction. The Morrison Gallery opening was still 5 days away. That gave me time to set the stage properly. I started with Margaret Dalton. Finding her contact information took some effort, but I eventually tracked down her office number at the nonprofit where she worked as a program director. I called Thursday morning, introducing myself as a concerned business owner who'd had dealings with her husband. Mrs. Dalton, I said, I think there are some things about your husband's business practices that you should know. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Margaret Dalton was a smart woman who'd apparently had her own suspicions about Wes's recent behavior. When I offered to send her documentation of his financial irregularities and personal indiscretions, she didn't hesitate to accept. "I've been wondering where he's been getting money lately," she said. "His business account was overdrawn last month, but suddenly he's making payments again." "I think you'll find the source very interesting," I replied. Next, I contacted the 3 largest clients of Dalton Creative Solutions. Using my professional credentials and some carefully worded concerns about fiduciary responsibility, I managed to schedule brief conversations with each of them. I didn't make any direct accusations. I didn't need to. I simply asked the right questions and let them draw their own conclusions. "Have you been satisfied with the ROI on your marketing spend with Dalton Creative? Have you noticed any irregularities in their billing practices? Are you confident that your payments are being used for legitimate business expenses?" By Thursday afternoon, 2 of the 3 clients had requested detailed audits of their accounts with Wes's company. The third had already begun the process of terminating their contract. But the real masterpiece was what I had planned for Friday night. I'd spent Wednesday evening at Murphy's Bar, buying drinks for a very specific group of people. Local reporters, photographers, and social media influencers who covered the city's art and culture scene. I'd mentioned, casually, that there might be an interesting story developing at the Morrison Gallery opening. Nothing specific, just enough to ensure they'd be paying attention. I'd also reached out to several of Lena's colleagues at the advertising agency, including her boss, David Morrison, no relation to the gallery, despite the name. I'd suggested, in my capacity as her concerned husband, that they might want to attend the opening to support Lena's new creative direction. The stage was set. The players were in position. All that remained was the performance. Friday evening, I dressed carefully. My best suit, the one Lena had bought me for her company's awards dinner 2 years ago. Italian silk tie, Swiss watch, leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. I wanted to look successful, confident, and completely in control. I arrived at the Morrison Gallery 30 minutes before the official opening, early enough to position myself strategically, but not so early as to seem eager. The gallery was already buzzing with activity, caterers setting up champagne stations, artists hanging last-minute pieces, and early arrivals claiming the best viewing spots. I found a corner near the main entrance where I could observe without being immediately noticed. Then I waited. Lena and Wes arrived fashionably late, making their entrance like royalty gracing the common people with their presence. Lena wore a red dress I'd never seen before, probably bought with my money, and clung to Wes's arm like a teenage girl with her first boyfriend. They worked the room together, introducing each other to their respective social circles, accepting congratulations on their courage and new beginning. Several people shot sympathetic glances in my direction, clearly aware of the situation but unsure how to react. I let them enjoy their moment. I even raised my champagne glass in a mock toast when Lena spotted me across the room. She looked confused, then worried. This wasn't part of her script. At exactly 9 o'clock, when the crowd was at its peak and the champagne had loosened everyone's tongues, I made my move. I walked to the center of the gallery and gently tapped my champagne flute with a fork until the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet, "I'd like to make a toast." The gallery fell silent except for the soft jazz playing in the background. Every face turned toward me, some curious, others uncomfortable. Lena's expression shifted from confusion to panic as she realized I was about to say something she couldn't control. "I want to toast my wife, Lena, and her business partner, Wes Dalton," I began, raising my champagne flute higher. "Their creative collaboration has been truly inspiring to watch." A few people chuckled nervously. Wes straightened his tie, probably thinking I was about to make some pathetic plea for reconciliation. Lena stepped closer to him, seeking protection in his presence. "You see, I'm an analyst by trade," I continued, my voice calm and conversational. "I spend my days looking at numbers, finding patterns, identifying risks and opportunities that others might miss. It's made me very good at recognizing when something doesn't add up." The crowd was listening intently now. I had their attention, and I was going to make the most of it. For instance, when a failing business suddenly starts making payments on overdue accounts, that's interesting. When those payments coincidentally match mysterious charges on my joint credit card, that's a pattern. When both events happen while my wife is working late on special projects with said business owner, well, that's what we call actionable intelligence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared as people started recording. This was exactly what I'd hoped for. "But the real artistry," I said, looking directly at Lena, "was in the documentation. The careful construction of a narrative where the boring, controlling husband becomes the villain, and the brave, oppressed wife finds the courage to leave with her knight in shining armor. It's quite a story. Very creative. Lena's face had gone pale. Wes was looking around the room like a trapped animal, probably calculating his chances of reaching the exit. The only problem with creative fiction, I continued, is that it falls apart when you fact-check it. I pulled out my phone and opened the first audio file Jules had sent me. Lena's voice filled the gallery, crystal clear. The key is documentation. I need him to look unstable, possessive, a few strategic arguments, maybe a police report if he gets aggressive enough. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, shocked whispers, and the unmistakable sound of someone dropping their champagne glass. Lena lunged forward, trying to grab my phone, but Wes held her back. "That's enough," he said, his smooth confidence cracking. "This is harassment." "Is it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I'm just sharing some creative work. Isn't that what gallery openings are for?" I played the next recording, this one featuring Wes's voice. "Remember, the goal is to make him snap. Get him angry enough to do something stupid, preferably in front of witnesses." More gasps. I noticed several people backing away from Wes and Lena, as if their deception might be contagious. "Here's my favorite part," I said, queuing up another file. This is where they discuss the financial arrangements. Lena's voice again. "He has no idea about the separate accounts. By the time the divorce is final, I'll have moved everything liquid. The house will have to be sold, but that's his problem." The gallery had gone completely quiet except for the soft whir of phone cameras recording everything. I could see David Morrison, Lena's boss, taking notes on his phone. Several reporters were already typing frantically. "Now, I know what you're thinking," I said, addressing the crowd like a professor giving a lecture. "This all sounds very calculated, very premeditated. You might even call it fraud. But I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't possibly comment on the legal implications." I paused to take a sip of champagne, letting the tension build. "What I can tell you is that it's been fascinating to watch two people destroy their own lives so thoroughly. Wes here is about to lose his biggest clients. Apparently they don't appreciate having their marketing budgets used to fund extramarital affairs, and his wife Margaret was very interested to learn where his recent cash flow was coming from." Wes's face went white. "You contacted Margaret?" "I contacted everyone," I replied. "Your business partners, your clients, your creditors. Amazing how quickly people lose trust when they realize they've been lied to." I turned to Lena. "And darling, I should mention that David Morrison has some questions about your expense reports. Apparently charging personal items to the company account is considered embezzlement. Who knew?" David Morrison stepped forward, his expression grim. "Lena, we need to talk. First thing Monday morning." "This is insane," Lena said, her voice shaking. "You can't just destroy people's lives because your feelings are hurt." I laughed, and the sound carried clearly through the silent gallery. "Destroy your lives? I haven't done anything except tell the truth. You destroyed your own lives. I just documented it." The crowd was starting to disperse, people clustering in small groups to whisper about what they'd witnessed. Several approached me with business cards, apparently impressed by my presentation skills. A few reporters asked if I'd be willing to give interviews. Wes grabbed Lena's arm. "We're leaving." "Excellent idea," I said. "Though you might want to avoid the main entrance. I believe there are some photographers out there, and Margaret's divorce attorney wanted to serve you with papers tonight. Something about asset preservation." They pushed through the crowd toward the back exit, leaving behind a room full of people who would never look at them the same way again. Jules appeared at my elbow, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "That was beautiful," she said. "Absolutely beautiful." "It was necessary," I replied. "Sometimes the truth needs a little help finding its way to the surface." I finished my champagne and headed for the exit. The evening had gone better than I'd hoped. Lena and Wes's reputations were in ruins, their financial schemes exposed, their social circle turned against them. Within a week, they'd be pariahs in their own community. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. The fallout from the gallery opening exceeded my wildest expectations. By Monday morning, the video had gone viral on social media, shared and reshared by thousands of people who loved watching entitled cheaters get their comeuppance. Local news stations picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about social media and public accountability. Lena didn't come home that weekend. I assumed she was staying with Wes, though given his current circumstances, that arrangement probably wasn't as comfortable as she'd expected. I spent Saturday morning changing the locks and having a security system installed. Perfectly legal. The house was in my name, purchased before our marriage with money from my inheritance. Lena's name was on the deed as my spouse, but she had no independent claim to the property. I also visited my attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, who specialized in family law. She reviewed the evidence I'd compiled and whistled softly. "This is the most thoroughly documented case of marital fraud I've ever seen," she said. "Your wife's attorney is going to have a very difficult time arguing for anything beyond basic necessities." "What about her claims of emotional abuse?" Patricia laughed. "With this evidence, no judge in the state would believe her. If anything, you have grounds for a countersuit. Theft, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. You could take her for everything she's worth." "I don't want everything she's worth," I said. "I just want her to understand that actions have consequences." Monday brought a steady stream of phone calls. Reporters wanting follow-up interviews, colleagues expressing support and offering to testify about my character if needed. Even my mother called from Florida, having seen the story on a national morning show. "I never liked that girl," she said. "Too ambitious for her own good." The most interesting call came from Margaret Dalton. She wanted to meet for coffee to compare notes about our respective spouses' deceptions. We met Tuesday afternoon at a quiet cafe downtown. Margaret was nothing like I'd expected. Older than Lena, but elegant in a way that suggested real class rather than purchased sophistication. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never needed to prove her worth to anyone. "I should thank you," she said after we'd ordered. "I've been suspecting something for months, but Wes is very good at manipulation. Having concrete evidence made everything much clearer." "How are you handling the divorce?" "Efficiently. My family's attorneys have been preparing for this possibility since before we married. Wes signed a prenuptial agreement that becomes void in cases of adultery. He'll be lucky to leave with his clothes." I admired her composure. Where I'd felt the need for public revenge, Margaret was handling her betrayal with quiet, devastating precision. "What about his business?" I asked. "Finished. His remaining clients terminated their contracts yesterday. The landlord is evicting him at the end of the month, and without access to my accounts, he can't make payroll." She sipped her coffee delicately. "I believe your wife is about to discover that her new boyfriend is considerably less solvent than advertised." That evening, I received a frantic phone call from Lena. She was crying, barely coherent, begging me to meet her somewhere private to talk. "Please, Nick. I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. I'll end things with Wes. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes." "Where are you staying?" I asked. "At the Marriott downtown. Wes was supposed to pay for it, but his credit card was declined. I'm using the emergency card, but I know you can see the charges." The emergency card. I'd forgotten about that. It was connected to my personal account, meant for genuine emergencies only. I could cancel it with a phone call. "Room number?" I asked. 1247. "Can you come up? We need privacy for this conversation." I agreed to meet her in an hour. But first, I made a few calls. The Marriott's general manager was surprisingly accommodating when I explained that my estranged wife was using my credit card without permission to pay for a room where she was conducting an extramarital affair. He agreed to have security present when I arrived to ensure there were no disturbances. I also called Jules, who confirmed that Wes had been staying in the room with Lena until this morning, when Margaret's attorneys had served him with papers freezing all joint assets. "He's panicking," Jules reported. "His business is collapsing, his wife is taking everything, and now he realizes Lena doesn't have access to your money anymore. I think he's planning to cut and run." "Perfect. Let him abandon Lena the same way she'd planned to abandon me." I arrived at the hotel at exactly the appointed time, accompanied by 2 security guards and a hotel manager who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Lena answered the door in a hotel bathrobe, her eyes red from crying. The confident, polished woman who'd humiliated me at the coffee shop was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate and frightened. "Nick, thank God you're here. We need to—" She stopped when she saw the security guards. "What's going on?" "I'm canceling the credit card," I said simply. "The room charges stop now." "You can't leave me here with no money." "Sure I can. You're a successful creative director at a prestigious advertising agency." "Oh wait, that's right. David Morrison fired you yesterday for embezzlement. My mistake." Her face crumpled. "That's not fair. Those were legitimate business expenses." "According to the company audit, you charged over $15,000 in personal expenses to corporate accounts over the past 6 months. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, hotel rooms for your affair. That's not creative accounting, Lena. That's theft." The hotel manager cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if the card is canceled, you'll need to provide alternative payment for the room by tomorrow morning, or we'll have to ask you to check out." "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. "You should have thought of that before you decided to destroy our marriage," I replied. "Actions have consequences, Lena. You taught me that." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Lena, Wes left for Miami this morning. Jules saw him at the airport with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket. Apparently he found a new mark, some widow he met online. You might want to call him and see if he's planning to come back for you. The sound of her sobs followed me down the hallway, but I didn't look back. I'd spent too many years being manipulated by her tears to fall for them now. Outside the hotel, I called Patricia Wells and updated her on the situation. She'll probably try to claim you abandoned her, Patricia warned. Let her try. I have recordings of her admitting she planned to leave me, documentation of her theft, and witnesses to her affair. If she wants to play victim, she picked the wrong opponent. The next morning brought news that Wes had indeed fled to Florida, leaving behind unpaid debts and a business in ruins. Lena had checked out of the hotel and was reportedly staying with Jules, though that arrangement probably wouldn't last long given Jules's own precarious situation. I was starting to feel like the protagonist in one of those revenge movies where everything goes exactly according to plan. It was intoxicating, this sense of control after months of being manipulated and deceived. But I wasn't done yet. Lena still had one more lesson to learn about the consequences of underestimating people. The final act was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since the gallery opening, and the city had moved on to newer scandals. But I wasn't ready to let Lena fade quietly into obscurity. She'd spent months plotting my humiliation, and I intended to ensure her education and consequences was complete. Jules had provided regular updates on Lena's deteriorating situation. The stay at her apartment had lasted exactly 4 days before Jules decided that harboring a disgraced embezzler wasn't good for her own reputation. Lena had bounced between various friends' couches before finally moving into a studio apartment in the worst part of downtown, the kind of place she would have sneered at when she was spending my money on designer handbags. Her job prospects were non-existent. Word had spread quickly through the advertising community about her firing, and no reputable agency would touch her. She'd applied for positions at smaller firms, but the background checks always came back with the same result: theft, fraud, and moral turpitude. Meanwhile, I had become something of a local celebrity. The Gallery Guy video had been featured on several national news programs as an example of how social media was changing the way people handled personal disputes. I'd received interview requests from magazines, speaking invitations from men's groups, and even a few movie offers from producers who wanted to turn my story into a film. I'd turned down most of the attention, but I had accepted one particular invitation that would serve my purposes perfectly. The Riverside Business Association was hosting their annual charity auction, a black tie event that drew the city's elite to raise money for various worthy causes. It was exactly the kind of gathering Lena would have insisted we attend when we were married, an opportunity to see and be seen by the people who mattered. This year, I would be attending as the guest speaker. The association's president, Robert Chen, had called personally to invite me to share my story as part of a presentation on integrity in business and personal relationships. The irony was perfect. Lena's betrayal had transformed me from an unknown analyst into a symbol of moral courage. I spent the afternoon before the event at my barber, getting the full treatment: haircut, shave, even a manicure. I wanted to look successful, confident, and completely unaffected by the drama of recent weeks. The image of a man who had not only survived betrayal, but emerged stronger from it. The auction was held at the Riverside Country Club, the same venue where Lena had always dreamed of being accepted as a member. The irony wasn't lost on me as I pulled up to the valet stand in my freshly detailed BMW, a car I'd been able to afford only after canceling Lena's credit cards and stopping her drain on our finances. The ballroom was filled with the city's power brokers, all dressed in their finest and ready to spend generously on charitable causes. I recognized many faces from newspaper society pages and business journals, the kind of people Lena had desperately wanted to impress. Robert Chen introduced me to the crowd with genuine enthusiasm, praising my courage in standing up for truth and accountability. The applause was warm and sustained, a sharp contrast to the nervous silence that had greeted my gallery speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, looking out over the sea of attentive faces. 3 months ago, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I thought it was simply a matter of someone breaking their promises, violating trust, choosing their own interests over their commitments to others. I paused, letting the words settle over the room. I was wrong. Real betrayal isn't just about breaking promises. It's about the systematic destruction of another person's reality. It's about gaslighting, manipulation, and the careful construction of elaborate lies designed to make the victim doubt their own perceptions. The room was completely silent now, hanging on every word. When my wife decided to have an affair, that was a choice. A hurtful one, but ultimately just a choice. When she decided to steal money from our joint accounts to fund that affair, that was theft. When she conspired with her lover to frame me as an abusive husband in order to maximize her divorce settlement, that was fraud. I could see people throughout the audience nodding, some taking notes on their phones. But when she did all of this while making me believe that I was the problem, that I was boring, controlling, unworthy of love or respect, that was something far worse. That was an attempt to destroy my sense of self-worth, to make me complicit in my own destruction. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. These people understood what I was talking about. Many of them had probably experienced similar betrayals in their own lives or businesses. The lesson I learned, I continued when the applause died down, is that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about having the courage to stand up for truth even when the cost is high, even when it means exposing uncomfortable realities about people you once trusted. More applause, even more enthusiastic than before. Tonight, we're here to support charitable causes, to give back to our community, to demonstrate that success carries with it the responsibility to help others. But I would suggest that charity begins with honesty, with ourselves, with our families, and with our business partners. We cannot build a better community on a foundation of lies and deception. The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. People approached me afterward with business cards, speaking opportunities, and investment proposals. I had become, quite unexpectedly, a sought-after voice on matters of ethics and personal integrity. As I worked the room, accepting congratulations and building new professional relationships, I noticed a familiar figure near the service entrance. Lena stood there in a black server's uniform, holding a tray of empty champagne glasses and staring at me with an expression of pure shock. She was working as catering staff at the event where I was the honored guest. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and I saw the exact moment when she realized the full scope of her fall from grace. 3 months ago, she would have been on my arm, wearing a designer gown and networking with the city's elite. Tonight, she was clearing their dirty dishes. I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast, the same gesture I'd made at the gallery opening, but this time, the meaning was different. This wasn't the beginning of her humiliation, it was the completion of it. She turned and fled toward the kitchen, probably hoping to avoid any further recognition, but it was too late. Several people had noticed her, and the whispers began immediately. "Isn't that the woman from the video? What's she doing here? I heard she was working for a catering company now." The story would be all over social media by morning. Lena Garrison, former creative director and would-be socialite, reduced to serving champagne to the same people she'd once hoped to impress. I stayed at the auction until the very end, making new connections and solidifying my reputation as a man of principle who had overcome adversity with grace and dignity. The contrast with Lena's current circumstances couldn't have been more stark. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I reflected on how completely the tables had turned. Lena had set out to destroy me and claim my assets for herself. Instead, she had lost her job, her reputation, her social circle, and her future prospects. She was working minimum-wage jobs to pay rent on a studio apartment, while I was being celebrated as a symbol of integrity and resilience. The boring, controlling husband she'd mocked had become a success story. The brilliant, ambitious wife who'd thought she deserved better had become a cautionary tale. Justice, I realized, wasn't always delivered by courts or lawyers. Sometimes it was simply the natural consequence of people's choices, amplified by their own arrogance and cruelty. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment in the quiet darkness. The house looked different now, cleaner, more peaceful, free from the tension that had permeated it during the final months of my marriage. It felt like home again. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I thought it might be Lena, trying once again to negotiate some kind of reconciliation or mercy. Instead, it was from Patricia Wells. "Divorce papers filed and served. She's not contesting anything. Should be final within 60 days. I smiled and put the phone away. The last chapter of my marriage was finally closing, and the first chapter of my new life was about to begin. Lena had taught me an important lesson about the dangers of underestimating people. I hoped she had learned something equally valuable about the consequences of betrayal. Somehow, though, I doubted she had the capacity for that kind of self-reflection, but that was her problem now, not mine. I walked into my house, and closed the door on the past for good. The last laugh, as it turned out, was mine after all.